All right, good morning. Hopefully, I don't overpower you with my strong voice, but thanks for coming. If you've been to one of these earlier this week, there's a lot of reading I got to do. Um, welcome today to today's session, Best Practices in Shredding. My name's Randy Brace. I'm the president of Riverside Engineering. I've been in the industry 40 years now and installed shredders, designed shredders, operated shredder. Um, so been in the industry a long time. Um, so now we'll get to the good part. All ReMA events follow ReMA's antitrust policy and code of conduct. Copies of the policy are available at your seat and at the ReMA website. When you entered the room, your badge was scanned. While scanning is not required, doing so does help ReMA to count the number of attendees, and in addition, it will give you access to additional information after the convention. Please make sure that your cell phone is turned off or set to vibrate. Please make note of the emergency exits that are clearly marked and illuminated with signs. Should there be an emergency, you will be directed to exit via the foyer areas to the convention center parking lots. Recordings for many of the convention sessions will be available within the next 2 weeks. Visit the ReMA website for more details. The mobile app ReMA Connect is the best way to receive updates regarding the convention, connection with other attendees, and access to the expo schedule. Do we have any members of the media joining us today? Okay, thank you. This presentation is intended for general informational purposes only and does not constitute legal or professional advice. The views, analyses, and commentary expressed are solely those of the contributors and do not necessarily reflect the official position of ReMA. The best practices discussed herein are not exhaustive and are voluntary in nature. While efforts have been made to ensure the accuracy and completeness of the content, ReMA makes no representations or warranties of any kind regarding its adequacy and expressly disclaims any liability for errors or omissions. Any reliance on the materials provided is strictly at your own risk. Where necessary, please consult qualified legal counsel or appropriate professionals. So finally, thank you to the sponsors that sponsored this event. And now I'd like to introduce the speakers today, Adam Weitsman, George Simoes. Give you a little bit of So Adam is a highly respected leader in the scrap metal industry, known for his innovation, integrity, and commitment to sustainability. Adam is the CEO of Upstate Shredding and Weitsman Recycling, one of the largest privately held scrap metal processors in the United States. With decades of hands-on experience and a proven track record of operational excellence, Adam has helped shape best practices across the country. Today, Adam operates 2 shredders, 10 recycling centers, and 4 new steel service centers. George Simoes, with nearly 40 years of operation experience, having worked for some of the largest shredding operations in the United States, George is an expert on plant management, maintenance, production, and innovation. He is currently providing operational and technical support for all of the SA Recycling operational shredders. So let me see if this is working. So best practices shredding. Thank you guys for being here. I know a lot of people were able to catch an earlier flight. Thank you for staying for this. So the topics that we're going to be covering, safety, which our industry's really key on putting first. You know, our motto is safely or not at all. Productivity and efficiency, maintenance, and then lastly, but not least important, environmental. All right. So Adam, George, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you for having me this year.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. So we're going to kick off with the safety. And So we did a little talk through about how this would go, and hopefully this turns into a nice conversation dialogue. But if you guys could share a couple of safety things that, or related situations that have occurred at your facilities. So Adam, I don't know, you had a couple of.
Yeah, sadly, we've had, two fatalities at our, one at our shredding operation and a fatality at one of our feeder yard operations, I'd say in the past 10 years.
Right.
And, those, when you have something like that, it's the next level horrible thing, and you have.
Can you share what happened, what wasn't in place at the time, why they occurred, and then what's changed?
First, the first one was two independent truckers were dumping. We have a huge canopy, so when you come to our facility, you're basically dumping under a huge roof
Right.
that is like 60 feet tall. So the one truck was on one side of the canopy and the other one was on the other, two independent drivers, and they were too close to each other. So this one went up in the air and the load shifted and it fell and crushed the driver that was out of his truck on that side.
Okay.
So that was like a really horrible incident.
So now you've got some protocols in place, some education of the drivers before they're allowed to come into your yard.
Yeah, we have like a really strict protocol where you can dump,
Right.
when your box can be up in the air, if you can be outside of your truck.
Right.
So, I mean, that was one that definitely could have been avoided. That was definitely an avoidable incident there.
Right.
But
Okay. And we actually had a couple of pictures. Unfortunately, they didn't make it in time to get into the presentation, but you also had a compressed natural gas tank make it into your yard, even though you've got a lot of procedures and protocols in place. What happened there?
yeah, we inspected the load. It was a huge compressed gas cylinder off of a garbage truck. But in this one, it was enclosed, so you couldn't see it. And the people signed the documents that it was removed. Our shear cut into it, and it blew a huge hole right through the warehouse. The hole was probably 4 foot in diameter,
Right.
20 feet in the air. So
the picture that you had showed the hole in the wall through the side of the building, but was that also the video of the explosion that occurred? Was that when the cylinder?
We had the video because all the yards are camered up, really strong. We have cameras everywhere.
So you know where the load came from?
Yeah, we went back and we knew the customer, and that was a whole other situation. But yeah, that was something that was.
But being able to hold the supplier accountable for what they brought into your yard, which.
Yeah, and they accepted responsibility for the thing. But that was a pretty bad one.
Yeah. Anything else for close calls that you want to, or not necessarily close calls, but safety related?
Safety related, we all have to be very conscious of our operation, and we have to account for the worst that can happen. That's very important. Awareness is everything, and we as managers, as responsible for the operation, we need to ensure a proper education for the people that work in our operations. Not just to the point of making our safety meetings, recording our safety meetings, but to ensure that the people understand the message that is given to them, because it's for their own good. Everybody wants to walk in the yards, work the day and come home safe. That's the ultimate goal. So all the proper procedures in place, all the safety awareness. But the most important thing is when we do give that message to the employees, to make sure that they do understand that. That's the key. Yeah. It's just not a written commitment that they attended to a safety meeting, is to make sure that they understand the message. Because it's natural human behavior to take shortcuts. We all know that. So it's us as the parents of our children that need to ensure that, every day, every hour, every moment.
So George, I know, having been with you in different yards, PPE, so personal protection equipment, you take it very seriously. You're wearing it. Maybe you've got it in your bag with you here, but how serious do you take it, and why do you take it so serious? I mean, are you setting an example, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's that's why PPE exists, to protect ourselves. wants to come home blind just because they didn't wear the safety glasses. Even if an employee or even ourselves visiting in a yard, it's very important, not only giving the example, but also it's important to every single employee to take the PPE serious. You might say, I'm not going to use these pair of gloves now. I'm just moving this piece of scrap there. Well, things happen. You got a cut in your hand. It's going to get infected. It's going to be time off work. Why? It would be a lot simpler just to use that glove. Yeah. I've seen mistakes throughout my career that I'm just going to grind this little piece, so I don't need the safety glass. It's a 1 second job, and that 1 second will make someone blind. So again, at the upper level, we are responsible. It's like we're taking care of our kids. We care of our kids, so we got to do the same thing to our employees. Remind them, enforce, and perhaps change their behavior. It's very important. So PPE is a very, very serious thing.
Adam, do you have something you would like to add, like how you make sure the employees know that it's very serious for you?
I think it started, I had to get with the culture myself, because we're telling everybody to wear it, but I was probably the worst offender at the whole company. I'm walking around the shredder without my stuff on, without my protective equipment on, but it starts from the top, and it's just the culture is everything.
Right.
People have to buy in, and once the culture done, people really self-police themselves.
And I understand that you've had to get serious with some people that were not using the PPE the way it needed to be used. And
I mean, we don't like to really terminate anyone. That's the last thing we want to do, but we've had to get to that point. If people are consistently not doing it, we've had to let those people go, because again, it affects the culture of the business if some people see that some are wearing it and some are not.
Right. And then once that happened.
And you probably saved their lives.
Hopefully.
Probably. So it's a tough decision, but it needs to be done. If you are at non-compliance, that an accident will happen with that employee. So by doing that, even hard discipline, you end up saving someone's life.
And the others know you are serious about it as well. All right. How about walkways through the yard? Does that, George, you're visiting a lot of different yards, so some that may be changing from the last time you were there or not maybe involved with layouts. How do you?
Yeah, so every single operation at SA Recycling, we have designated walking areas, and we do take very seriously. I mean, areas need to be roped off, having signage, and making sure that visitors or people that are not familiar with the plant, they follow those strict rules. They just don't walk around the yard. It's important. It's important to know your yard. It's important to limit the access to visitors that are not familiar with our yard. So when a visitor comes, should report to the main office. We need to make sure that they are wearing the proper safety and they are given a tour if that's the case, or a meeting with our GM, and if they are complying with our protocols in place to keep them safe. So designated areas, roped areas, don't walk by areas. It's very important. Every single company should have that. It's a must. I mean, we are in the 21st century. We take things very serious, and that's one of them I like to see.
Adam, I don't know if you have anything you want to talk about walkways. I know you have barricades that people have to walk outside those barricades.
Yeah, we have it really strict. Everything is, painted, roped off.
Right.
To keep everyone where they should be, because so many accidents have happened because of not having that.
Yeah.
We've definitely limited the amount of accidents once we got really strict on, passageways that go.
Right. It's hard to take people's phones away, but when somebody's on a phone, they are not paying attention to their surroundings. Right.
Yeah, that was the second fatality we had. A manager was on his phone, and the loader was just going, no piles around, just at an open area. He was on his phone and walked. It was a gigantic loader, but walked in between the tires because he was on his phone and wasn't paying attention. So
have you restricted phone use?
It's hard. It's the hardest one. Yeah. I mean, we restrict it, but a lot of violators to the phone policy for sure.
Okay. So everybody's heard the term lockout, tag out. So it's
And try out.
And try out. That's a new TO on the end. So it's Lotto O, but, yeah. So I think it's important that, as you're going to the yards before you go in a shredder, so you've got.
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of safety, that's probably, every safety rule protocol in place is important. But lockout, tag out, it just makes sense. If you are going to perform work on a specific point, on a conveyor, something like that, you want to make sure that you and the people around you are safe. And there's no excuse not to do. You have your own lock. Nobody can open your lock. You lock out that conveyor. And now you have to make sure before you perform any kind of work, you're going to press that start button because maybe you locked out the wrong conveyor. So that's very important. That's something that, we've added to the lockout tag out is the try out before you start the work. You're protecting yourself. Even if it's for 5 minutes during operation, let's say we are shredding and, people that have shredders, they understand that. We are shredding. It's a beautiful day. And now we jam up a conveyor and it's just a piece of rod that is on top of the conveyor. Well, the easiest thing to do would be just jump on the conveyor, take that piece of rod. But remember, if Paul, John, or whatever thinks, okay, everything is good and I'm going to start the conveyor, you can die. So those 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it's nothing compared. People always say the excuse, it's rush. We don't have time. Put it in this perspective. You spend 5 minutes protecting yourself and the others. Okay. Now let's move the scenario the other way. You did not use your lockout tag out and unfortunately an accident happened. Not even a big accident, just some. Okay. Somebody got hurt. How many minutes do you think it will take, just to assess the scene, to see what happened and all that. So you lost an hour or two, possibly the rest of the day of production. So 5 minutes, that's all it takes to lock out, tag out.
Yep.
Very important. We want everybody safe.
Yep. Safely or not at all. It's an available sign through ReMA. That posted around the yard.
Let me just add something. I've been in the industry for a long time, almost 40 years, and I see every year that goes by that people are understanding the safety more and more. You go back 40 years ago, the lockout tag out didn't even exist. Very few places would use that. It was customary to put one person by the start button and say that don't start until I tell you so. That was our lockout tag out. Now I would say over 90%, if not more, of the facilities that I visit throughout the SA or even before, they use lockout tag out. They take it serious. And again, the supervisors, GMs, they should reinforce that, refresh them, and just tell the employee, look, it's for your own good. We want you to come back tomorrow to work for us. Nothing more important. There's no asset more important than the employees. And everybody knows that.
Thank you, George. Well, let's move into the productivity and efficiency of shredders section. And I think our industry has heard full box shredding stated over and over and over. I think everybody probably understands the term, but maybe not how critical or how important it really is. And George, I think, you've got a...
Oh boy, I love to talk about this. Like everything else, I could talk for hours and hours and hours. Anyway, so full box shred. Everybody talks about full box shred and what it is. And yes, I do full box shred. If you ask anybody, they all do full box shred. Well, you have to understand how a shredder works. Okay. If it was a perfect world, the in-feed would be carrying an unlimited sheet of metal with no interruptions and would be just fitting into the shredder forever and ever until you turn off the shredder, right? So you would put the shredder at capacity, meaning there would be no voids, no air inside the shredder, would be just steel rumbling around and forcing so much that it would it just tries to get out, but it's full at its maximum capacity. Imagine your coffee grinder at home. You jam all those beans and you click. When you first click, everything is there and the coffee is coming up, and then it starts winding off, right? So full box shredding, the benefits of full box shredding. So first of all, you get more tonnage per hour because you're utilizing the full capacity of your motor and the open area on your shredder. You're cramping as much material as you can inside that. So productivity is up, and now think about this material that is inside. So the shredder is like a big box like this, right? And you have a rotor. So you have a given diameter of the inside of the shredder that is allowing the steel to be in as it gets shredded. So the fuller it gets, the more chance of steel is actually doing the shredding. It's not the steel is hitting each other, doesn't need the help of the hammers.
Scrap on scrap shredding.
Yes,
Sure.
it's scrap on scrap shredding. So the benefits of that, besides the production and productivity, is that you're going to deliberate a lot more of your Zorba, right? So if there's a piece that has steel and some attachments of aluminum, right? If you don't hit it a couple of times, it's going to come out, because the shred is not a miracle machine, right? It's going to come out, that attachment, into the piece of steel. But if you densify that just by forcing the material in, you're going to deliberate a lot more Zorba. And believe me, it's a big difference between full box shred and just shredding. You'll find those additional 1.5 to 2% Zorba recovery, which is a lot. Not only that.
Let me stop you there, because going in and out of full box shredding is actually a problem. So when you first start up the shredder, that initial minute of startup,
Correct.
and when you stop and come out of full box shredding, when it's coming out, you get a lot more long bars. You don't get the liberation. So every gap in feed creates a loss of full box shredding, and
Correct.
each one of those is creating the negative effects that we're trying to avoid.
Yes.
But let's transition into automated feed systems, and how that affects full box shredding.
So I'm a full believer on automatic systems. The only problem with automatic systems is if you have an operator that has been in the company for a lot of years, he used to do manual, he shies from the automated systems. So automated systems, it's great because they can read what the mill is asking for. It's all based on amperage and RPMs on the shredder. So these systems optimize the shredding. They see that full sheet that I just talked about as if it was a constant onto the shredder. And if it's not, if it senses a gap because your amperage is going down or your RPMs are going down onto the shredder, you will speed up your in-feed and the feed roll to have to try to avoid those gaps. There's a little bit of a difference. There's fully automated systems, which includes the in-feed conveyor. So the in-feed conveyor reacts as well. So if he needs more feed, the in-feed conveyor will either speed up or, just doesn't stop until it gets the ramp full. And there are people that just have the automation on the feed rolls. So the feed rolls, for the ones that you don't know, is those rolls that actually feed the material onto the shredder. It's a preference. I think if you have a seasoned operator that fully understands the capacities of the shredder, if he understands that peaks and valleys are no good, you have to maintain, I think a fully automated system, it's the key. When you're training somebody, I'd say you'd start with the feed rolls to have control, so the operator can have control on the feed going into the feed rolls. And once he understands that, then, the full automated system, it's the way to go.
Right.
So it's there basically to avoid human error, to avoid the gaps on the feed. And of course, your productivity will go up tremendously.
And Adam, I think you're operating, a cruise control type automated feed system.
I mean, it definitely works. When we put the automation in, we gained about 10 to 15% But what we're going to be doing next is we're going to be taking the pulpit away, and we're going to be moving the shredder operator in the main office.
Okay.
So he'll be at a regular desk.
So utilizing infrared cameras and some sound equipment near
That's the project
motor
we're doing
room.
now is we don't want the person up above anymore. So they'll just be sitting in an office a couple doors down from me, be able to wear regular clothes, be out of the way of explosions. And I think we're going to be able to get a lot more production, bringing the operator inside.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's a good idea.
Oh, I think even for safety reasons, it's better. I mean, remember when shredders start popping up about 60 years ago or so, there was no automation. There were no infrared cameras. There were no cameras. You had to have the human feeling in there to actually see, what the shredder could take and what could not. In today's world with the technology available, there's really no need for the operator to be so close to the shredder. I mean, it's not going to be more productive. Actually, I think it's going to be more counterproductive because he gets a lot more distracted, because he has the feeling of seeing your infrared and your cameras and also visualize what's going into the shred. So there's a distraction point of that. So if you are relying just on the technology, if you are made aware that you just have that screen to look at it, there's no other distractions, you could be a lot more efficient.
Let's transition into what you were just talking about, motivating your employees to work together. Let's move into what do you think motivates employees to do their jobs well, or the way you are hoping they would be doing those jobs.
Yeah. So one of the most common mistakes that supervisors do is, we can find good people. Now it's so hard now. We cannot find good people. So it's not true. It's not true. I think it really falls on us, the mentors, to groom good people. So spending time teaching an employee and give him an opportunity to excel. So you bring a new employee on board, and if you hired him in the first place, is because they told you they had a quality, a experience that you were looking for, right? So that's the first point of hiring. You hired him because you believed in him. But where everything fails is you believe in him when you bring him to the door, but then what? You cannot expect an employee to be very productive to know what needs to be done on the first, second, third a weekday. And the old method of, okay, I'm going to bring an employee, I'm going to put him with that guy that has 20 years of experience. Probably that guy is so busy doing what he's doing that he's not going to have time to groom this other employee. So how do we get around? So one of the first things that, a manager should do is sit down with the employee, explain the operation. He needs to understand what we do, how we do, and what needs to be done. Set up expectations for that employee. Don't just disregard and neglect that employee and say, okay, you're part of the team, you were a picker, so why do you need to learn maintenance? Well, he needs to understand the operation. And another thing, within a week or two, go back to the employee and ask him, look, now that you understand the operation, that you are with us, that you're part of our family, is this the job that you want to continue to do, or you see yourself being a crane operator, being a welder? Because we lose a lot of opportunity if we don't ask. We say, we don't have welders, I got to hire contractors, so on and so forth. A lot of people from the bottom jobs would like to be given the opportunity. So if you don't ask, you'll never know. You might be losing an opportunity to give a chance to that employee.
Tell you what, George, let's let Adam jump in a little bit here.
Of course.
He's a lot smarter than I am, so we can.
So Adam, you talked about, the cleanliness of the yard, how important that is,
image.
The image, everybody that comes in, everybody's working together as a team, how.
I mean, the image of the yard, you've been to our facilities, like everything is painted. There's not a weed growing. Like we're so OCD, me and my operations guy, Steve, who's sitting right there. Like we send out hit lists every morning of full inspections of everything. That means the garbages are dumped. The floors are waxed. Like if you come in our facilities, we want to not be like a scrapyard. We want to be like an aerospace company, that level.
But that motivates employees. They want to come into a nice, clean environment.
It's helped us with our safety. It's helped with profits. It helps, like, if you have an industrial account come to visit you, it shows, like, just a level of excellence. Everything's just about raising the bar each day. What we try to do.
Good. George, did you have?
I totally agree. I mean, if you go to a clean house, if you threw a paper on the floor, it will be noticeable. So, and I think it also motivates the employees, to have pride in their operation. It's very important. I see many of our operations with that. People do care. People maintain the facilities nice, clean, presentable, because the employees spend there 10, 12 hours a day, if not more. I mean, they should feel good about their operation. And remember, in any operation, there's the most important things, from your bottom employee to the upper management. It's pride and wanting to win every day. We are all winners. We choose our pets. Our pets are decisions that we make every day. So when you bring an employee to understand that pride of ownership, the willing to win every day, then your operation is a successful operation.
Well, there's a slide up right now, Shredder's performance and capabilities. And I think, George initially started talking about knowing your shredder's capabilities, how important that is, so that, if you're operating a large shredder and you're only doing half its capacity, it needs to be addressed. So understanding your shredder's capabilities, it's really helpful to have somebody like George. Adam has people that are coming in and reviewing their productivity rates. So did you have something you wanted to say to that, George, before we go to maintenance?
Okay, I'll try to be as short as possible because it's huge. It's
big
a
topic.
Big thing. All right. So how do you determine if your shred is doing well? So if you are looking to this slide here, and it will show you, like a mega shredder could do 170 tons per hour to 400 tons per hour and all that. So when you see these numbers, we're talking about full box shredding. Okay. And I would consider a good shredder if they can maintain at all times 60% full box shredding. That's a good achievement because, believe me, it's almost impossible to get, it is impossible to get 100% full box shredding. If you picture this, and no matter what.
To maintain 100%.
To maintain, if you picture this, when you're feeding white goods light iron, for example, onto the infeed, natural voids will happen because it's a very inconsistent flow of material. It's not a homogeneous material. You have this washing machine, then you have, so for an operator to make them a lot more efficient, he has to understand how the machine works. So in order to minimize those voids and to up your productivity at that machine, you need to make a blend. Okay? So a blended material means, you figure out your peaks and valleys, and your blended material might be 3 grapples of light iron, put 1 car, so like this, the density of the material, the tonnage per hour will be pretty much consistent to avoid that. It's all well and good when we look at this and then say, if you have an inexperienced manager, say, okay, so I have a 98, 104, 106, 4,000 horsepower, and I'm only doing 100 tons per hour. And the manufacturer says I could do a 150 or whatever. So This is actual runtime of the shredder. That does not include the downtime. That's what they say is runtime. So you have to, the times that you're down or you are idling because you have no feed on in-feed doesn't count. This is what the mill can do at full box shredding at 100% at the time. But what's acceptable? What can you do, to improve your production productivity? People say, okay, so there's a lot of factors, the grade size that you use, what about maintenance on your feed roll? Because a lot of people forget that the shredder doesn't start at the shredder. It starts at the tail pulley of the in-feed, and it's very noticeable if you analyze the graphs that, your programs show you, you could see those drops, those peaks and valleys. But why are they created? You could have a lot of material on the in-feed going as fast as it should. But now it comes to your feed roll, and you see the feed roll is just riding on top of the material. And why? Because people don't pay attention. If you have good teeth on the feed roll that actually can grab the material, you can maintain a good flow of material into the shredder.
This is a good transition point into maintenance. So
yes.
Proactive maintenance versus reactive maintenance.
So analyzing, reading your data, studying your downtime, it's by far one of the most important things that you can do. Penciling in downtime, entering on an app, or, just having the sheets of paper that your tower operator gives you on an everyday basis. If you don't analyze, don't do it. Don't even do it. Why bother? It's our job to see where the mistakes are, the opportunities. So downtime, it will tell you reoccurrences. Okay, so if you have every day, no feed, hard to feed, mill jam, or ramp jam, there's something wrong with that area. Okay, so you try to blame the machine that is not capable of doing something when it's actually not the machine. The machine can only eat what you put inside, right? But if you take attention to your downtime and you see a lot of ramp jams, not feeding, you see the feed roll and the operator is lifting the bottom of the feed roll all the time, something wrong in there. Why don't we investigate? The same thing applies for any conveyor throughout the plant. If you take a detailed downtime every single day and you see today, 10 minutes on Z-Box jam, 20 minutes Z-Box jam, 15 minutes Z-Box jam throughout a week, I said, there's something wrong with the Z-Box. I mean, it's obvious. So let's go there. Let's inspect. You're going to find that a wear plate is bad, that you have a hole on the Z-Box. So when we blame a shredder and say, okay, this guy in Shish Kebab City is doing 100 tons an hour, I can only do 80. Why is that? Ask the whys.
But I think it's a little different too, though, in the corporate world. Like, I'm an individual owner, so like we have to get this stuff shredded and out of there. So sometimes, sure, in the best case, you always want to do the maintenance, but every day we shred to the ground. Sometimes, how sometimes we're there all night. We're shredding anywhere from like 2 to 3,200 ton a day, but we don't stop till it's all gone.
2,000 to 3,200 tons a day.
Yeah.
So I'm sure everybody understood what that.
So we try to go ground clean. So the problem is, like, sometimes when you're an individual operator, which I know a lot of people are here, you have to get that material out.
So I know that you've changed how you've attracted the right employee recently.
Yeah, I actually copied a friend. So right now we're only hiring Division I athletes. It could be soccer, it could be hockey, it could be volleyball.
What are the traits that they're bringing?
If you really think about it, they're up early in the morning. They're disciplined. They're hardworking. They're performers. They have the intensity of that culture and teamwork. Usually they're on a team at most things. So our HR department, we've gone to all the universities. This is even people at the shredder, operating the shredder.
Right.
So, and it's really worked because it's a slow process because we're starting to get them in, but it's definitely changed the whole culture of the company overnight.
Right. Now you'd think it'd be more expensive, but what are you finding?
Really not, because we're getting the job done in a quicker amount of time. So your you can get someone out of a university that has a bachelor's in engineering or mechanical, science. And it's not costing much more than the overtime, with the general labor.
How do you find are they staying with it? Are you able to maintain?
I think the retention rate will be better because there's a career there. And, as George was saying, George is one of the smartest guys in the industry. So as George is talking here, I'm like writing down stuff. I'm fixing myself over here. But, it's just, they want to learn. And it's all about having a group of soldiers that we're a team, and I want soldiers around me. And, that's how we've been able to, no disrespect, that's how I can compete against an SA Recycling or a Sims or the big guys.
Right.
Is that we're all in.
That's good. George, you guys, I know you get to work with all the employees.
Yes, and we worked together, many years ago, and I don't disagree with Adam at all. It's one way of doing things. So people, as we all know, they're your most important asset. Shredders, when you compare over 200 shredders in the United States, different sizes and all, the machine is there. It's the people that will make the difference. It's those analytical points that will actually make the difference in the operation. I'm not talking about the employee training, which, you can train a total unskilled employee into your best mechanic. You could hire D1 because they already have, some mechanical engineering background, or it's probably a lot easier for them to understand that type of operation. Either or, there will be training involved. So it's the way you take care of your people, and the people will take care of you. But in both of the spectrums is the win-win philosophy. You want to create winners, people that are willing to go to battle every day, that care about the company because they know the company cares about them. It's reciprocal. So
let's move into critical spares.
Yes.
So I'm sure both of you guys have stories about critical spares that you have on site, and maybe there's a story or two where you didn't have that critical spare and what that cost you versus, the cost of having that critical spare. Adam, I don't know, do you want to?
Yeah, our biggest fear is downtime. Downtime is the worst thing. And if that's why I was telling you, we wanted to come out because now we want to have, an assembled spare of everything, like a double feed roll. So if something's wrong with ours, pop it out, put it back in.
Right.
We have a big motor there, so we want a spare. Right now we have a smaller horsepower motor as our spare, but it takes a lot of time to retrofit that in. So we want to have another exact motor to put in. So it's really important. It's expensive and it's hard, especially in this industry right now.
Expensive to have them, but it's more expensive not to have them when
True.
Lead times are as long as they are for some of those
and
items.
The lead times now, some things, almost a year for a new motor.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it's not 1980 anymore. You just don't get stuff off the shelf like we used to. A small bearing could take 3 weeks to come in. So what are critical spares? What's your philosophy as a new shredder operator? Okay, they all say about critical spares. I know I'm going to have a spare rotor. Okay, I know I'd have to have a spare motor and probably a spare feed roll. Well, I got a couple $1 million in there, right? But those are the main things and the minimal, okay, that one operator needs to have there. Those items could take 8 months, a year, to come to your facility. And the risk is not worth it. Imagine you being out of business for 3 months. You're going to lose market share. It's just impossible, right? So as you grow, your critical list becomes bigger because now you can afford. So my rule of thumb is if you cannot get anything in your plant in 3 days, anything that takes more than 3-4 days the most, it's a critical item. Because imagine your plant, and I really don't care the size of your plant, being 4 days down. Okay. So we have material storage, possibilities of fire, paying the employees because you're not going to lay them off for 4 days, even though we always find something to do. Okay. And if you're more than 4 days, you possibly, the supplier that is supplying to you, because you're going to have a big line in front of the scale, is going to go somewhere else. So that's not a good idea. So list the spares, regardless of the, motor, feed roll, a head pulley for the in-feed, a tail pulley for the in-feed, a spare magnet, if you have 2 magnets, okay?
Magnets.
Belting, you need to have a reducer for the magnets. It will take 18 weeks to come in. It's not something off the shelf anymore. So those are the critical items. Belting, you should have a spare. You don't need to have a spare for every 36-inch belting that you have there. You probably can only afford a roll. So you buy a roll, with your largest conveyor. So if your largest conveyor is 200 feet, okay, you bought a 200 feet. So if that big belt rips, you have that. But now if a 50-foot conveyor, 36 inches, rips, you cut from that belt. So smart thinking. You have to think about, and when I talk about critical spares, remember one thing. Liners, grates are also critical spares.
Yeah.
Because people, okay, I'm going to buy the feed roll, I buy this, and I have close to a set on the ground of the side liners for the mill. Now imagine you drop one. Yeah, you can improvise, making up a liner. It's going to cost you tremendous amount of money. You might search for a similar shredder that can, they can lend you a liner, but you should have, a set on the ground, at least 1 or 2. 6 months of inventory minimum of spare parts should be at the shredder, but it's very important.
Let's move to environmental. So this is the last topic, and then we're going to have some time at the end, hopefully, to answer some questions. So hopefully you guys have maybe put some questions down that you might want to ask for response. Inbound material inspection, so what comes into the yard, goes through the shredder, winds up impacting kind of your environmental. Where does that start? How are you guys addressing environmental? Go ahead, Adam.
It starts at your buyers. Your buyers need to know the quality of the material coming in.
Right.
They have to have good communication. We were talking about this, George, in our last night, all about communication. Your buyers need to pass that to the scale house. That needs to pass that to the inspector. It goes the whole way, because 9 out of 10 problems we have are from the same small group of suppliers.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, communication is the key. In 40 years of doing this, and I'm not perfect, I learn every day. I learn the mistakes that I went through, so I try to avoid you guys from making them again. The buyers. How many of you have given a tour, explained the operation to a buyer? Probably half. So if they are buying the material for your shredder, don't you think they should know how everything works? They should spend some time at the operator and see what actually goes through the shredder, what causes downtime, how to avoid unshreddables. The first time that buyer experiences which we don't have them, he'll understand that he should not bring that stuff here, right? But how do we avoid? So first of all, I think it's so important to educate our buyers. They need to understand what can and cannot be processed, what material causes problem to the shredder. If you go to a buyer, it's all about tonnage coming in, and he doesn't understand that rebar, wire, springs, and all that, it's a mess to our operation, right? So, but if he experiences that, he will buy smart tons instead of volume. Very important. Tons that you can actually make money. So After that is how do you avoid, how you minimize your risk of material going into the shredder. So goes back again to communication training. You know, you hire a guy, you're going to say, oh, he's going to be an inspector. You're going to spend time with Rudy there. You know, he's at the tele di infidi. He tells you what to do. Big mistake. Don't do that. You know, you're wasting time. You're just filling a position. That's what you're doing. You're filling a position. That guy will be, I'm not saying worthless. That's a bad word, but it's not going to bring much value to you unless he understands the operation. So the same training has to be done. He needs to understand, you know, look for the unshreddables, you know, as a load gets dumped, communicating with the cranes. The inspector is not there just to take 10,000 pounds off for dirt. Most likely, he doesn't even know how much dirt weighs, which I'll explain. There's a very simple method. You know, that guy is to prevent not only the dirt, the buying the material, but also things that could cause harm to the operation. So if he understands that, if an example is given, if he experiences the shred, how it works, he's going to bring so much value to your company. And one of the easiest things that in the past I had my employees doing is his best friend, it's a can of paint, fluorescent paint. As he inspects the load, he sees a thing, puts across so the crane operator knows where the material is for him to pick up. And he talks to the crane. Very important. When he receives a load with 3 unshreddables on it, right away he should take a picture, and that picture should be sent to the buyer so the buyer can communicate in real time with the supplier. And maybe the supplier, if it's a good supply that brings a lot of ton, maybe should be given a tour because he might not know that causes harm to our shredder. So you as a general manager, it's time that you need to invest, you know, putting these protocols in place if you want to better your operation. Because unshreddables, flammables, I mean, they could cause some serious damage.
Yeah.
But
so communication, I think it's a huge topic. Adam, anything about communication in the yard that?
No, it's the same what George was saying. Just knowing your customer.
Well, let's jump to handling an unexpected visitor from maybe the EPA or the DEP. What's the protocol? So they come in, you know, the scale guy sees them. What happens? Yeah.
At our company, I mean, you get the phone call immediately.
Yeah. You quarantine them into the office, but you don't let them enter the yard. They may not have the appropriate PPE. You got to get them.
I mean, it's just common sense. I think if you're not doing this in your yard, you need to review your protocols. So an unexpected agency comes to your yard, you know, there should be a protocol in place that person should be taken to the office and speak with the general manager. Now, every company, I know my company has a protocol in place. I don't know the details, but, you know, for experience, that GM should know who to contact, to put in contact that could help that agency to perform their job. We have nothing to hide, but we don't want to give wrong answers just because we think we know. We don't want to show them things that we think that they're good, bad, or indifferent. There's a person assigned in every company. I know you do have, such as SA, that has been taught how to deal with agencies. So imagine an agency speaks a different language. It's a foreigner to our little country there. So we don't know how to talk their language. So before we try to talk their language, we need to point out the right person. So the inspection or whatever it is can be done. It's not that we are hiding anything. It's just we want to put them with the right person.
Education. And really it moves into the next topic of, you know, what steps are you taking to educate your community, you know, bring people in, tours? Adam, you might want to.
I mean, we do that all the time. Like, you know, we use social media a lot in our company to give the community a better understanding of what we're doing. Like we're posting almost every day, inviting the schools in, inviting politicians in, inviting everybody in just so they have a good understanding of like what we do. And I think it takes the shock value off of when something bad happens. I think then they're more familiar with the operation.
Yeah. You mentioned a school bus tour. So the kids from a school got to tour, you know, they were on a bus, but they got to watch.
Yeah, we got the bus in the scrap from the schools. They're converting over to the electric buses. So we got this contract. All these buses are coming in. So it was pretty cool. We had these tours and the kids can like cheer on seeing their school bus.
That's good. What about community outreach? Are you doing things for I know you do a lot of things for the community. What's that impact or what's that value that you've seen?
I mean, it's like our local area has been really great to us. Like we're allowed to operate this big shredder in the middle of a small town.
Yeah.
And, you know, we want to give back to the community, big philanthropic and things like that, because this area has given me an opportunity, you know, hasn't been an easy road to get here, you know, so, they've been really supportive. So we tried as much as we can to, you know, help the community that's been helping us, you know. So.
Good. George, anything that you want to add there or
Oh,
do I have
God.
to move to the fire department?
You can move to the fire department, but I just want to say, SA Recycling has a super excellent program on reaching out to every single community. Just because of our size with over 140 facilities, we do, and we create tremendous impact in every single community that we are around. And it's a trade-off. You know, the community should not see recycling as the bad guys, you know, as it's portrayed many times. You know, we are here to help every single community. So bringing awareness, it's one of the greatest things that you can do. You know, we are good for the green planet. We are the good guys, not the bad guys. And once the community understands that, and they are where we're getting our employees from, so it's good. I mean, you go on LinkedIn, and every day there's something about SA that is doing. You know, it's all important.
Positive things. Right.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
So let's talk about the fire department, how important that relationship is, that they understand your yard, that you're bringing them in, that they can connect to your fire hydrant connection.
We let them do the trainings. Like all the local fire departments do their trainings, their burn trainings or their extraction using the jaws of life. They do it at our facility. So they have a comfort level of where we're at, where everything is. And that when we do have a call or an emergency, it's not like they're coming in blind.
Right. It's huge.
Well, the same thing with SA. I know for many of our yards, we have a close relationship with the fire department. And put this into perspective, you know, you don't want them there, right? Because, you know, if you call the fire department, it's because something is bad, right? But you want them to understand your operation. You want them to know the ins and outs of your operation and how to react, you know, in case of a fire. So the more knowledge you give them, the more that you help them, even, you know, dry runs, you know, put a fictional fire in there, because you don't want to come to the point that you need them and then they're going to hook up their hoses and your fire hydrant treads are not the same, or they don't know if they can park the truck there. You know, they don't know what material they're dealing with. So the more you educate them, the better will be their response. So it's very important. I think if not all, the major part of our facilities are doing that. And it's very important. The same thing for the police department. You know, I know that we do many programs where we help them, with cars and buses, jaws of life, like he said. So it's another thing, you know, they're part of your community. They'll be the first, 911, the try runs, the same thing, you know, you have to educate them because they will be providing a better service to you. Very important.
What about electric vehicles? Are you segregating those when they come in and treating?
Yeah, we're doing that now. Like Steve's gone to all the training. I haven't gone, but Steve went to all the training. So Steve knows. So we've been going to all our facilities, showing them how to take them out safely.
Right.
I think in the past, 6 months, maybe a year. Good. In the beginning, you only see it very randomly, and now it's coming in a lot more.
Good.
Yeah, that'll be a different conversation 10 years from now, I'm guessing. But right now, most of the protocol would be to set them aside, make sure that, you know, it's a totally different breed of material. So there's a lot of education that needs to go into it and how to process, how to minimize, especially fires from lithium batteries, the contaminants and how people can approach that in a safe manner. So right now, if you get an electric vehicle, the best thing that you have to do is set it aside. Don't treat it like a normal auto. As years come by, I'm sure their protocols will be in place. It's a totally different approach, recycling a electric vehicle than, the normal combustion gas engine.
Well, we've got about 15 minutes left, which I thought we'd leave for questions, but
absolutely.
Was there anything that you guys would like to put out there before we go to questions? Or
one thing, like it's to talk about it, but if anybody here like wants to come to our facilities at any time, like you can just take down my number. You guys can come out, give me a tour. You guys can crash at our house if you want. I don't care. But if people want to come out,
breakfast included, I'm sure.
But if anybody wants to come, anybody feel free. We're open 7 days a week. We're always open. So if anybody wants to come out, feel free to call or text or hit on social media or whatever. And you can bring your whole team out if they want to train at our facility for a day and see what we're doing. And maybe we can learn a little from you at the same time. That invitation.
Wow.
Definitely open to everybody.
So that's great. Thank you, Ab. All right. I have two people already staged. I don't know who was first.
Albert has seniority.
All right.
That's only because I have gray hair. Well, first of all, thanks both George and Adam. The presentation was great. And like all great presentations, it generates more questions than answers usually. And I've got a couple of questions, or a few questions. And I want to start off with safety, basic questions. What do you do as far as PPE to enforce that for outsiders? And I'm not talking about people that are coming to the office that are going on a tour. I'm talking about, let's say, outside haulers or outside scrap dealers bringing material in, people like that. And also, do you offer any safety incentive programs to the employees? And a very basic question, and Adam's comment about the fatality that they had with the guy with the cell phone triggered this in my mind. We're trying to keep as few people on the ground as possible. And there's a debate going on throughout the company, throughout the operations, of where truck drivers should be when they're getting loaded and unloaded. I'd like to know what your opinion is on that. Also, if you could give me your opinion on pre-shredding. And George was talking about full blocks shredding, and I can identify with that. I've been touring several construction and demolition processing sites lately, and they have a similar problem that they refer to as the black belt phenomenon. They don't want to see black belt. I wanted to comment on your critical spares. We used to have the philosophy that we wanted just-in-time delivery, and because starting with COVID, we switched to just-in-case inventory for critical spares because other than the space that it takes to store us, it's only the time value of money, because whatever you buy, anything on a shredder is going to wear out and you're going to end up using it eventually.
I think we ought to probably...
One more. And what are you doing about fire mitigation?
Fire what?
Fire mitigation.
Okay. Well, do you want to talk about PPE? How do you enforce PPE to visitors coming in? And it's got to be, unless we're going to just answer his question.
Okay, I'll do it very fast. I think it's common sense. I think every single supplier, truck driver, should wear PPE. Must.
If you don't have the PPE, you can't enter the yard.
And in regards to loading, where the driver stands on the trucks, I think we're going to go back 5-6 years ago. It's pretty much everyone have waiting areas for the truck driver to wait while it gets unloaded, especially if it's not a dump. It's very risky to unload something with the driver in the cab. I wouldn't do it.
How about loading?
The same thing applies for loading. You really don't want to do that.
we still have the driver in the truck when we're loading.
Drivers stay in the truck.
Yeah. The driver's always in the trucks.
Don't want them out. Don't want them wandering the yard.
If you have, it's a double edge, and I agree. If you have a waiting area, use the waiting area. If you don't, it's tough. But I'd rather have the truck out on the waiting area. It's the safest way.
All right.
We're loading the truck so fast that we want them to pull out.
Right.
They're lined up so it's not, and they go. So for us, it'd be a little hard just because of that time.
Right.
Delta between the two things would be really hard.
Okay.
And how about pre-shredding and fire mitigation?
We're installing a pre-shredder at our Newcastle facility now, so I'll let you know how it goes. And you can come down when we start it up.
So you have Newcastle's a smaller shredder.
Yeah.
And then the Owego yard's a bigger shredder. So you wouldn't put a pre-shredder at the big shredder.
Not at the big shredder, but it's a smaller shredder.
Right.
Those are some of the smaller shredders are slow.
Yeah.
So we need to speed it up. So we're going to see how the pre-shredder goes. It helps with explosions, helps with VOCs, things like that. So.
And then your last.
Fire mitigation.
So one of you guys is putting in some equipment, new equipment. You're putting in.
We went to the Fire Rover, right, Steve? The Fire Rover group that's here. And we're going to be putting in the water cannons everywhere in the yard. And right now we have the bombs that, did these totes, the tote bomb.
330-gallon totes.
We have these plastic totes all over the facilities that our crane can pick it up, squeeze it, and a huge amount of water goes. So that's actually worked. They're really inexpensive. You can get them on eBay or at $30 used. I think they're $30-40 used.
You just used them the other day, you said.
Yeah, we had a fire in the box and, it was getting a little crazy and, we took our big pedestal crane that moves on tires and, we opened up 3 of them and it put out the fire.
Oh.
So that was.
Yeah, we use water cannons in every single facility. High pressure water cannons in strategic places so we can hit anything that develops there. It's not a if, it's a must. A fire will happen in your facility. The trick is to not having piles at the end of the day, just like Adam referred, and that's our protocol as well. And if you are down for a week or so doing maintenance, something that is taking longer than expected, you cannot shred, you need to size your pile. So instead of having a 500-ton pile, you have 250-ton pile.
But the technology's gotten so amazing that they can sense the fire before there's a fire.
That's right.
And that's the key, like before it
really starts to propagate.
In the fluff pile, they can sense the heat. So we can get to the fire before an open flame, that's like a game changer because once it ignites, it's hard to put out.
Right. Yeah, because it doesn't take much. I mean, a simple battery on a pile could cause a fire.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Be much quicker than that. First, a shameless plug. ReMA is having its annual Shredder Ops Forum on November 10th and 11th. Also to inform the group, this past week during our governance meetings, the Shredder Committee and then further the board adopted a resolution to forward a best practices document regarding shredders, specifically in fires, where we're going to try to standardize what the expectations should look like at our facilities. So for those of you who do own and operate shredders, I would encourage you to reach out to David Wagger, who is the shredders a liaison from ReMA. Please get involved. Please participate. Thank you.
David over on the far side. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Scott Miller with Sims Metal. Great presentations. Learned a lot. I had to choose. I want to narrow my questions down to a handful, just 2. So one is I was interested by when you said about moving the operator to the office. I'm trying to see if you lose any benefit by having them away from where the activities are, in feed and so on. I can ask my second question now or wait?
Well, I think the first question's good. We'll answer that quick.
I mean, it's going to be trial and error. It's just a safer environment for the employee. We've had some massive explosions there that, knocked the guy out of the chair. And I'm not supposed to talk about it here, but we should just be honest. You've had some big ones and we've had some monster explosions there. And I don't want to put the guy at jeopardy. You can have all the bulletproof glass you want, but, with big fire and stuff like that. So I think it'll be a trial and error. I think the positives will outweigh the negatives, but it's just, again, training and, using R&D that's available, that's out there.
Well,
I just concerned to be that they having them in the office, they're kind of away from the action. Maybe it's more like, the people who fly the drone operator loses something when they're flying, when they're not actually in the plane. And I'm wondering if
Yeah.
it's similar.
I mean, that's been a concern. But we saw somebody that did it, and it's been really successful out of Canada. I think American Iron and Metal might have done the first one. And, he's usually on the forefront of technology and equipment. So we're doing a little copying of our competitor up north.
I think the situation has changed at the shredder, right? So operators used to be able to see what was coming down the feed ramp into the shredder at the feed rolls if you had something to stand up. That's changing with enclosures and, that keep the scrap from flying out. So the visibility is
cameras,
already
vibration. There's, software now for vibrations.
Right.
The camera quality of cameras back then, it was like black and white. You couldn't see anything. Now the infrared, you can really see in the box. Communication between your employees is going to be tight, but I think, it's a little scary, but I think, in the end, I think that is the future. And, I can be able to monitor it more. I can be able to.
I think it's the present. So I'll give you my analogy, and it's very simple. Okay. And I think I touched that point when this question was asked before, is you ask your son, a young teenager, where he would play better his video game. Out in the park, on a dark basement without anybody. He'll tell you it's the dark basement because there's no distractions. So I think being at the shredder at current times where we have the technology to be away, it's a mistake. The employee gets distracted. There's noises, there's a little vibration here and there. And then he always has a choice between looking directly to the shredder or looking at the monitors that we provide for them, being the camera, being the infrared. So sometimes he's looking, so he's not taking full advantage of the available technology. So I think as we progress into the future, it's not only for a safety standpoint that it should be away from there. There's no need to have a person at risk there, because I've seen even the Lexan blasts pop out with a big explosion. So, we minimize the risk for the employee to be there and also give them direct access to the available technology. And that's so important. If he's paying attention to that infrared camera, he doesn't need to pay attention. If he wants to see what's happening to the magnets, to the conveyors, he has the screens there. So he's totally focused. He's part of the machine. It's integrating the human and machine. And I think it's very important.
Thank you, George. I think we have time for maybe one more question.
Well, Scott told me I could comment on this motor control or the operator's control room. Well, today we supply those as a standard as a part of the MCC building, which is not up above. And I do agree with George's comments about the focus and all. We had a recent situation where a steel mill had an explosion and they had a damage to the operator's control room, and they moved it downstairs. And I've talked to them later, and they said, well, we didn't know it would be better or not, but guess what? It's better.
It's good to hear. Thank you, Scott.
Absolutely. Even reacting to an explosion or to a fire, if the employee is seeing that live through his eyes looking out, his reaction is going to be totally different than on camera when he can pause. It's like playing a video game. When he can pause, focus on that, hit the suppressant button, and without any panic.
Yep.
I like the video game analogy because I identify that with family members. So.
Did you have a second question,
yes,
Scott?
The second one is completely different. What sort of adjustments have you made to your inspection program given the onslaught of small lithium-ion batteries?
The lithium batteries?
Yeah. Have you changed your inbound inspection program and the ground at the shredder feedstock stockpiles to address finding the batteries before they find you?
Any kind of battery.
The little batteries, the small lithium-ion batteries, small and medium, we'll call it.
So I don't run a yard on the day-to-day basis, but I know what's going on the yards. And I think every facility, it's part of the protocol not to accept batteries. You know, if one comes in the scrap, that's why we have the inspectors in place. Of course, will be removed and a claim will be made to the supplier. But again, you know, it's all communication, all going back to your supplier and telling, look, this is a no-no. I know you need to get rid of that battery. We can do it for you. Just don't let it go on the scrap. Put it aside. We'll take care of that.
But they're coming in.
But they're coming in.
There's no way.
Yeah.
I'm more the realist. They're coming in.
It's impossible.
We're trying to mitigate that coming in. Maybe we're getting 5 out of 10.
Well, have you changed?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just, training, showing them where they are, what they look like, allowing the inspector more time to look at the load. But is it perfect? And no, hopefully someday with AI, you know, we're hearing all this AI. Someday I feel that when the load comes across the scale, we'll be able to scan the inside of that load to be able to tell which, hopefully in my lifetime, or if one of my kids ever takes over, this would be great. But in the load, I think someday you're going to be able to scan the load, so you'll be able to tell what impurities are in the load before they hit this.
We can only hope that comes sooner than later. I agree with you.
So that was a very interesting meeting I attended yesterday about the AI integration on scanning loads. But we all need to understand how AI works. You know,
George, we're going to have to pick it up later because we're out of time.
Sorry, guys.
George, Adam, thank you guys so much for your willingness to participate. Thank you.
Thank you.